Hi everyone, my name is Liz Alexander and I am a success coach here at the Student Success Center. Today I have the honor of presenting this wonderful workshop, which is study tips and note-taking strategies. So we are going to go ahead and dive right in, all right? We are going to discuss study tips and note-taking strategies. So something that I want to focus on first are study tips and the importance of study tips and what this actually looks like. So the first thing that I always recommend to students is to learn about yourselves, learn about you. For example, what's your learning style? And what this means is pretty much it's just a way that a student learns. It's a style of learning that refers to an individual's preferred way to absorb, process, comprehend, and retain information. Now, we're lifelong learners here. And yes, we get to learn about all this material and all this content around us and in our courses. But I also think it's really important to go ahead, take a moment, and learn about ourselves. So today we're going to explore a little bit of VARK. And VARK is an acronym for different learning strategies that we're going to kind of dive into and kind of pull apart, get to know a little bit more about them, okay? So let's start with the V. And V is visual learner. What this means to be a visual learner is that a student has a preference for symbolism and maybe different formats, fonts, colors that emphasize important points. These type of students are attracted to diagrams or maps or charts. They like interesting layouts and spatial formatting. For example, do you know that one student in your class or maybe in a class before where their notes are very detailed and structured and colorful? There's different fonts, there's designs, and it's absolutely a work of art. It's a masterpiece. Well, more than likely, they're probably a visual learner because that's how they're able to comprehend the information and really engage with it. Some really great strategies as a visual learner is when you study, when you write notes, use different types of fonts, whether that is by hand or digitally. Use uppercase and lowercase lettering. Try to underline as you go, as you read. Maybe use some color. You can even highlight the things that stand out to you. Those are great strategies if you're a visual learner. Another strategy is to use pictures, videos, slides, where the emphasis is really on the design and not the material. Yes, you want to focus on the material and the content that's being presented, but sometimes as a visual learner, the design of those notes, of that material really helps you to absorb that information, which is great. Another thing that I would recommend is when it comes to images, maybe connect a meme to a question as you're studying, or, apply that funny aspect to it. So whenever you're on that test or whenever you're trying to recall that piece of information, you automatically go back to that one image and you're like, oh yeah, that's what that's supposed to look like, or I remember what that is. And you can connect it to the information. So that's what a visual learner is. You get to really play with different diagrams, maps, charts, interesting layouts of that nature. So let's move on to A. Now, A stands for auditory or aural learner. And this type of student needs the information to be spoken or heard. You see, statements and questions are crucial for these type of learners. They really need to hear it to engage with the material, to absorb the material. And some great strategies to do so is to explain new ideas by either having a conversation with someone, discussing it out loud. Maybe they're listening intently to their professor or to their colleagues as they have a group discussion. Maybe it could be commenting as the lecture is going and raising your hand to ask a question so you can engage. Sometimes it may look like debating with others. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, and some people may take that as aggressive, but it's not that. It's just how that individual is really interacting with the information that's before them. Another strategy is to use voice recorders. Whether you want to go ahead and just record your lecture, record your class, again, with the permission of your professor, because you want to make sure that that's okay with them. But you can go ahead and do that. So when you listen and you go back to that recording, you can begin to hear again that those pieces of information that really stand out to you. Another thing that you can do with voice recorders is you can actually talk to out loud and be able to record your own voice going over study questions or answers, going over the reading and things that stick out to you. And again, just being able to listen to that again, review it to really study the information that's before you. Something that I think would be a fun strategy is to maybe use different voices to emphasize the material. Now, when I say this, yes, you can do impressions. I'm sure that'll stick, but being able to use voice inflections, whether that's being a little bit louder or a little bit more quiet, just being able to use those inflections or different pitches to really engage with the material, to help you study, to help you absorb that information is going to be helpful for an auditory learner. Now to R. R is our reading/writing learner. The printed word is preferred for them to receive and convey information. Some strategies for this type of learner is to create an order of hierarchy of information, such as an outline or a list, pretty much just the ability where they can categorize all of the information that's before them. I put an example here for the image so you can see just what that may look like. You have your Roman numerals, and then you have everything, your subpoints and your headers, all those just laid out and displayed in a nice fashion and a nice outline to categorize that information. Another strategy for this type of learner is to utilize dictionaries and glossaries and commentaries and a thesaurus. Believe it or not, being able to engage with the words and the verbiage in your either in your reading or within the material that you're studying really is helpful. Even looking up definitions of words can really provide just that clarity that this type of learner needs to really absorb and retain the information. Another strategy that we really recommend is to rewrite any words into your own words. So say if you have a passage before you and you're trying to memorize this passage for a test, it's going to be a little difficult, right? Well, the best way to go about that, to really learn the content that's within that passage, is to, yes, read it, study it a couple of times, but then take that passage and rewrite it in your own words. This way you begin to formulate your own thoughts, your own words, your own structure within your head, and you begin to make those connections with the material versus trying to memorize something that isn't in your own language or doesn't really correspond to how you would go ahead and discuss it or communicate it. So being able to rewrite your words and do so is a better option, is a great strategy. Now, for our next one, we are going to the kinesthetic learner. So the kinesthetic learner prefers to learn through experiences or things that are real. So what this means is that they are very much hands-on. They want to be within the content, within the material, whether it is an opportunity of sorts. So a great strategy is for them to apply what they learn through their actions. And some examples, again, are just hands-on experiences. This can look like making a recipe from a cookbook or going on a field trip. This could be a experiment of sorts, whether it is related to science or not. Um, Another thing that we really recommend for our kinesthetic learners is to have interviews or to look at case studies or real life events that help the students learn. So say you're studying about a historical period. You have events that have occurred, and there are really important people that also were in this movement or within this event that you need to kind of learn about and kind of gather so you can take your test and ace it. That's great. But sometimes for a kinesthetic learner, the material needs to be more than just something that they read about or write about. They have to really experience it. So what that looks like is to be able to read case studies about that historical event, about that person, read a little bit more articles and information, people's personal experiences on that particular subject have really helped kinesthetic learners feel that the content is still relevant, is still alive to them. And thus they're able to really relate to it in a much more personal level and are able to really take it and absorb it. Another strategy that we recommend is to apply actions to your studying. So whether you're out for a run or jogging, swimming, whatever it is, if you're trying to study, sometimes applying exercise or some kind of physical movement really helps the kinesthetic learner to absorb information. If you don't want to exercise and you're saying, Liz, that is too much for me, no worries. You can do hand movements. For example, I have an image right here on the PowerPoint that is pretty much showing that, where she has her hand on her nose and then her other hand up in the air. And something that you can do is correlate certain hand movements with pieces of information. That way, whenever you think of that hand movement or you do that hand movement, your brain can already go to that piece of information and recall it in a much quicker way. Another aspect to this is to role play when studying. Sometimes as a kinesthetic learner, you can just take the moment right then and there to talk about it out loud. Let's play pretend for a little bit and kind of get in that imagination station where here you are and you're presenting it. Pretend you're presenting it to an audience, to people, to that certain person type or people group, and start kind of thinking through it or formulating your own thoughts, your own conclusions and saying, oh, this would work or oh, this wouldn't work. And by doing that, you begin to really absorb and retain that info that you're needing or work through some of that information and say, you know what, I think I'm going to go this route because this makes the most sense. And sometimes that's what a kinesthetic learner has to do. The next type of learner is multimodal. So multimodal, what does that mean? That's not in BARC, right? Well, multimodal pretty much means that a learner or a student or an individual have multiple preferences. So they're not just within one lane of BARC and they have one learning style, but it really means that they have multiple learning styles. And that's okay, because about 2/3 of the population functions this way. And so that can look like you're both visual and auditory, or you're kinesthetic and visual, or maybe you're reading and writing and auditory. Whatever it is, you begin to play with those things and you get to see, okay, where do I best function in? What learning style is more like me? How do I best obtain or recall information? And what strategies can I use and implement that are going to help me, the individual, to achieve the goals that I have set before myself? Now, the thing is, some people don't know what kind of learner they are or their learning style, and that's completely okay. If you're unsure of what type of learner you are, no worries. I've attached a link here and you can just go to this website. You can look up BARC or vark-learn.com, and they have a questionnaire, about 10 to 15 questions, where you can go fill out those answers and then submit it, and it'll give you kind of your results and show you where you're most prominent, in which area you're most prominent in. So that way you can begin to take those steps and learn how you best function and what's your learning style. Now that we have gone over the learning style, we are here at the next step of my study tips. And the study tip that I have for you is to set the atmosphere. Now, a lot of people don't understand how important this step is, but it is so crucial when it comes to studying. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions and then we're going to dive in, okay? So I want you guys to be thinking on this, chew on this a little bit. What is your ideal study space? And now the next question, how do you function the best as a learner? So now that you're kind of chewing on that, taking that in, we're going to move on to the next slide. So the next slide that I want to focus on is how to create a space. And this isn't just any space, but this is a study space. Yes, it's very important. So first thing first, remove all distractions. That means your phone, your games, your TV, whatever it may be. You might need the computer, but doesn't mean that you have to have 10 tabs open of your shopping list, your grocery list, any other online games, whatever it may be. You can start closing those tabs and say, you know what, I'm not going to distract myself. I'm going to remove all distractions. Other distractions can look like being in a place where you're surrounded by people or by your friends or family, whatever it may be. Just taking a moment to remove any distractions and all distractions and saying, okay, I'm going to focus on creating my space. So that's the first thing, remove all distractions. The second thing, have easy access to everything you need before you start to study. Now, I know that I have not been very good with this one myself. But what this looks like is making sure that you have food, snacks, water, tea, coffee, whatever it may be at your disposal, but that you also have your equipment or your study materials before you, whether that's your laptop or your charger that you need for your laptop, a notebook, pens, syllabus, anything of that nature that you know that you're going to need for your study time. Take it with you. Go ahead instead of saying, oh, I forgot it, need to go get it, because sometimes that can serve as a distraction, or we may be focused on going to retrieve that item, whatever it may be, and then get distracted as we're doing so. And by the time we know it, it's the end of the day, or all that time that we were supposed to dedicate to studying is now gone. So just make sure that you have easy access to everything before you start. The next thing, lighting. Believe it or not, lighting plays such an important part when it comes to studying. So experiment with your lighting. And what I mean by this is that researchers have actually found that the students are more creative under warm light and then concentrate a little bit better under colder light. How interesting. So sometimes as students, we don't really pay attention to these things, or we're not fully aware, but maybe some students function better with natural light coming through the window and they feel like they can breathe and they feel great versus doing their homework in the middle of the night when it's dark and they don't have the best lighting. And some students operate the opposite. And if so, that's wonderful. But as an individual, begin to become aware of that, of your space. What do you need in your space? Do you need warmer lighting or do you need colder lighting? Do you prefer natural light or do you prefer a darker space? whatever it is, begin to become aware of those things and then start creating it for yourself. The next thing is to adjust your study space to the ideal temperature. So productivity is actually highest in a temperature range between 72 degrees Fahrenheit and 77 degrees Fahrenheit. I know, that's amazing. Which means that if it's anything lower or anything higher, it might not be the best temperature for you. However, because we're all individuals and we're all different and we're all unique, you get to determine what that temperature is for you. For some people, they might like it a lot warmer and they might be able to function that way. And for others, they prefer it to be like the Arctic and it be freezing and it be 68 or 64 degrees. And if so, that's okay. But you get to determine what your preferred temperature is and set it to that so you can create a space that is best for you to study in. So now I want to ask a couple of more questions, and these are ask yourself questions. Begin to meditate on these things. And so I want you to ask yourself, when it comes to your study space, do I function better with a clean, organized space, or would I rather have it messy and disorganized? You get to decide. The next one, can I concentrate better in the morning, in the afternoon, or the evening? Another question to that, a piggyback question to that is, when can I not concentrate? When do I completely shut down, or when can I not function? If you're not a morning person, the mornings might not be the best for you. The next question, can I function better in silence, or do I need some kind of sound in the background to kind of help me focus? Will I concentrate around people, or would I actually concentrate better alone by myself, secluded? Would I function best with a window near me? Maybe if I had plants surrounding me? Can I function in my pajamas, or should I get ready? And by getting ready, can I function better? So these are just some questions that you can begin to ask yourself as you create your space and begin to really dive into studying. Again, these are just tips to help you create that space that you need to get the best results. Now, what are some best practices for studying? How can I best engage with the material before me? Actively engage. I don't know how to stress this enough. I know we engage, but sometimes as students, we don't actively engage, meaning we can read a book and we can read about 5 pages and then realize we have no idea what we just read. And I know that's a common occurrence because I've done it before too. So as you're reading, be sure to be actively reading. And what that looks like is highlighting, making notes, underlining, putting little asterisks beside things that are important, or again, taking your own notes and doing something on the side, using sticky notes, whatever it may be, just being actively reading and note-taking to engage with the material. The next thing is to become the teacher. Now, what I mean by this is take the material, study it, absorb it, and then we're going to take that role-playing aspect that we talked about earlier and use it here. Pretend that you're the teacher now. How would you teach this material to your students? How would you communicate it to your students? Can you communicate it effectively? Or are there some areas that you can communicate effectively, and are there others that you're just not getting it or you don't know how to communicate? begin to play with this concept and really utilize it. As you become the teacher, as you begin to talk out loud and begin to wrestle with some of the ideas or some of the material, you'll begin to absorb it yourself and really intake the information because you're learning it from a different point of view, from a different perspective. Not only are you now receiving it, but now as the teacher, you are giving it to others. The next thing is to create concept maps or charts, again, to help you organize information. And this really applies to visual learners, but again, it's for whoever that really loves these types of visual aspects. So you can take these concept maps and organize, clarify your information, categorize it, whatever it may be, to show that you are actively engaging with your material. Another great tip is to create a study guide for yourself and for others. Again, just like the teacher aspect, the teacher concept, you're taking this and yes, you're using it for yourself, but think about it as creating a study guide for others. How can I best help others in this process? If it was me, if so another student was helping me, what would I have wanted? Or what would I have needed as I was studying? And begin to think like that. Again, it's just a shift in perspective, but in doing so, it really helps you to retain information that you might not have otherwise if you just remained in the perspective of a student. The next thing, best practice, is to be intentional. And this may be something that a lot of students struggle with, and that's okay. But again, you're taking the time to be intentional with your study practices. So first things first, plan and schedule your study time. I know we plan our classes, we plan our work, maybe rest time, but I also think it's really important to plan and schedule your study time. Sometimes by doing that, you put it within your calendar and you focus on it and you make sure that it gets done. Once you see it, once you see that reminder, you're telling yourself throughout the week, okay, this is Wednesday, I'm going to study for an hour, and then Friday, I'm going to study for another 2 hours, whatever it may be. But you're beginning to think in that way instead of saying, oh, should I study? Nah, rather not. And it's easier to dismiss it if it's not on your calendar versus putting it on your schedule is being intentional with it and being intentional with your time. Organize your materials. What I mean by this is to organize your notes, whether digital or on paper. Again, sometimes when we go to class, we have our notes, and yes, if you have a notebook, they're usually in the same place. But there are times when we're going so quickly or we forget that notebook or whatever it may be, and we don't put it in the right spot. It is so important to take your materials and make sure they're all together. So that way you don't lose information, you're not scrambled. If you didn't put a date on it, then you have no idea where it's supposed to fit in within the semester. And same thing with your digital notes. If you're just opening up Word docs and you lose your Word docs over time, maybe it's best to create a folder that is titled the name of the course, and that way it's all in one area, or to continue those notes with that one doc. So again, just make sure that all of your materials are organized and are easily accessible. Another thing is to space your study sessions out accordingly. What I mean by this is we have the tendency as students to sometimes go ahead and cram because we just lost track of time or we got really busy, we didn't plan accordingly. Well, this is the challenge. I'm challenging you to space your study sessions out. Again, this goes back to point number 1 of this slide. Plan and schedule that study time. Make sure that, yes, you have a study session that is on Monday and then another one on Wednesday or Thursday, and then you take another one to Sunday evening. Whatever it may be, begin to schedule and space those study sessions out so you don't feel overwhelmed with just content if you do it all in one day. Sometimes that can be overwhelming and you're cramming and it just doesn't stick. And instead of stressing about it, just take the moment to really focus on the material, really engage with that material, and then absorb it instead of, again, trying to cram it all in one session. The next thing is to set realistic and achievable goals when studying. Now, this goes back again to the cramming. We want to cram in 4 hours a whole semester. And while we might try to do that and we might be okay, it's not something that's actually sticking with us or staying with us. So begin to set realistic and achievable goals, saying that, okay, right now I'm working full time or I'm working part time and I'm going to school, either part time, full time. I have 1 hour on Monday to dedicate to studying, and that's what I'm going to do. And that's realistic, that's achievable. Once you do that, great. Or maybe it's even 30 minutes. But just being able to set those realistic and achievable goals for yourself as you study are great adjustments to really helping you achieve. Another thing to be intentional about is healthy breaks. We just want to intake all of this information, and although we can try, it's okay to take a break. Being able to breathe, take a walk outside, get a snack, being able to just lay down for a little bit, not open your phone, but being able to just lay down for a little bit, take your 5-10 minute break, and then get back to it is so healthy and it's so intentional. Another thing that you can utilize are tools that focus your attention on the material. And there's one tool in particular that I would actually like to bring your attention to. It's called Power Hour. And it's really just a strategy for students to help you best utilize your time. Now, I love to recommend this strategy, this tool to students, because I think it's so helpful when it comes to time management and really just laying that foundation, taking those steps to begin to build your study schedule or study patterns. So this is what Power Hour looks like. The first 10 minutes, you're just going to preview the assignment. That looks like reviewing any study questions or asking yourself what you're wanting to accomplish in this hour. What is something that you're wanting to focus on? Things like that. So that's kind of the 10 minutes. You're previewing the assignment. That can look like the reading. Okay, how many chapters do I have to read? Or a paper. What do I need to be focusing on for this paper? Again, if you're studying, what are the study materials that I need to go over? And that's how you preview your assignment. So for the next 40 minutes, you are going to go ahead and work on that task. And you're not going to focus on anything else. There will be no distractions. You've put away all of your distractions from keeping you from your work, and you're just going to focus on that. Now, it's best to have a timer. If you have a timer on your phone, being able to put 40 minutes on your phone, so that way you can just stay within those 40 minutes and be super intentional, super intensive with the material. And once that timer goes off, you are good, meaning you have 5 minutes to take a break. Again, go eat a snack, go take a walk, get some fresh air, stretch a little. But once that 5 minutes is over, come back. Again, you don't want to stay longer than 5 minutes because, again, you're going to get distracted or something's going to take your attention away from the material at hand. So after your 5 minutes of break, you're going to come back. And with the last remaining 5 minutes of the hour, you're going to review your material. If this is studying, okay, test yourself. Go over the questions. If you know the answers to them, awesome. But if not, that's okay. You can use that time, or maybe if you have more time that day, or maybe time another day to review them again. So you start to build or make notes of, hey, I really was able to study and grasp this information, but this information I wasn't. Now, if you're writing, review your material. That may look like just revising it, editing it, going back and reading what you wrote and seeing if it makes sense or if it applies to the guidelines that the professor has given you. Now, with reading, it can look like having a summary. So, say if you read 15 pages within that 40 minutes, can you recall the information that you read? Can you go by chapter to chapter or section by section and say, this is what I read within this section? And so that's kind of ways that you can review the material for Power Hour. So those are just a couple of study tips that I recommend for students that I think are super beneficial to all types of students. Despite what learning style that you are, you can take these elements and really apply them. Now for the second section of this workshop, I want to focus on note-taking strategies. So let's go over some note-taking tips. When we make notes, we have to make sure that our notes are clear and accurate notes, meaning, can we read our handwriting? Are they making sense? Do they really apply to the material? Or if you reread it, does it not make any sense? Does it not flow? Does it not even talk about what the professor was talking about? So sometimes just being aware of that and being intentional with making clear and accurate notes is a good tip. Come prepared to class is our next one. So whether it's digital or again on paper, make sure that you have your journal, your paper, pencils, pens available to you. If it's digital, make sure that you brought your computer or your charger. Minimize distractions. So if you're note taking, and this can be, let's say within the class, if you know you're going to be talking with a group of people, or there's this one particular person in the classroom that talks as the professor is lecturing, maybe take a day to sit away from them, at least for, that session or that class period. So that way you can take better notes. Or see if you're reading, again, if it's at home, if it's homework, something of that nature, remove all distractions, remove your phone, remove the TV, kind of separate yourself from those distractions. Now, organize and compare your notes. Again, just making sure that your notes are all in one place, all organized, they all make sense, are within the time period of the semester, so that way it goes with the natural flow of the course. And when I say compare your notes, I want to encourage you guys to go forth and actually talk with your peers. If you didn't get something, or if you missed something, or say if you were feeling sick one day and you weren't able to attend class, go ahead and reach out to one of your peers and see if you can get the notes or compare the notes. If something didn't make sense to you, hey, Susie, can I see your notes? Because I got this, but it just didn't make sense. Is that what you received as well, or did you get something entirely different? And again, by doing that, you can go ahead and correct your own notes and make sure that they are accurate. Another note-taking tip is to review your notes. Yes. Now, I know we take notes, but we don't usually review them unless there's a test coming up. And although that's all right, that's okay. Sometimes it's good to review the notes right after class or at the end of the day that day. Meaning that you're kind of just revisiting all of the information that you received during that class period, or again, that academic day, whatever it may be. And you're kind of just looking over it, absorbing it, reiterating it in your mind. So again, it's just remaining fresh. Now, the next tip that I have is to ask questions. Ask your professor questions as you're note taking, but if you're not really comfortable with that, or say you don't have a question until after you reviewed your notes, go ahead and write your question within your notes. Make notes of your question so that way you have the ability to revisit that, or the next class period be able to bring it up to your professor and say, hey, about these notes from the last class period, I actually had a question that I was wondering you could clarify or elaborate on. And then from there, you can begin to get that information that you're needing. So again, these are just some note-taking tips, some suggestions that will be helpful or beneficial to you as a student. So now I kind of want to go into some note-taking strategies. The first one is Cornell Notes. It's a very popular strategy to use. It's really just a system to take, organize, and review all of your notes. It's very easy to prepare, whether in or outside of the class, and it's actually considered very efficient for students when they need to recall information. So here I have it posted, just an example of what Cornell looks like. And so on the right, where I have it under 70%, 70% is just going to be the notes that you take in class. Okay, so for example, it says ask questions, kind of begins to have those headers with those kind of those points underneath those headers. And on the left side, we can see under that 30% that these are going to be questions or comments on the notes that you took. For example, say if you're learning about a historical event, okay, you're making notes on this historical event, that's great. But if you had a question or a comment on the historical event, you can put it within that left section of your notes and just kind of make those points there so you can revisit them or look more into it, or again, ask your professor about it. And then there at the very bottom, we have the summary. And so what the summary is again, just a synopsis of what you took from that day. So the notes that day, kind of writing it, say 3 to 5 sentences within the summary, and it's just a takeaway from the day. So again, Cornell Notes is very beneficial, very efficient, and has helped many students and will continue to do so. The next one is mind mapping. This involves writing down a central theme or subject and thinking of new ideas or related ideas to that subject. It helps to better understand and retain information. And really, it's a great strategy for our visual type of learners. So here in the picture, as we see, there is that subject, and then we have the different topics that lead from that subject, as well as notes, ideas, keywords that stick out to that one particular topic. And again, what's so amazing about mind mapping is that you can find connections or related ideas and begin to really formulate your own ideas or your own thoughts or your own conclusions, and really help bring the information together. So again, you just begin to find those connections and see how it all relates to each other as a whole. The next strategy that I have for you is outline strategy. So outlining helps users to organize and clarify their thoughts. It's a strategy that is pretty much best for our reading and writing type of learner. And it's also very useful when you have to prepare a paper of sorts, whether it's research or reflection, whatever it may be, and any oral presentations. And so kind of looking at the picture here, the example of the outline method, you have your header, you have your main topics, so that can be like a 1 or a Roman numeral. Then you have your points underneath your subtopics, and it kind of goes along that structure. So that's really what it is. It's just a structure and a way of categorizing information that helps you to best process it and retain it and to go over it. So again, once you kind of develop your own system, just stick with it, whether it is the outline method or Cornell or mind mapping. These are all great techniques and note-taking strategies for you to use. Now, with that being said, that was the end of my presentation and the end of this workshop, what I have to deliver to you, the students. But I want to thank you for attending, for watching this workshop, and just being able to look at all of these strategies with me, all of these tips, and I really do hope that you can apply them, definitely utilize them to your benefit. If you have any questions, or if you feel like you need a little bit more help, please feel free to reach out to the Student Success Center. We have coaches and tutors available to you to help you with these items and with any other needs that you may have. So with that being said, thank you again for joining me for this workshop, study tips and note-taking strategies. I hope that you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye.